we've reached the end already for the Connors. We had 2 episodes capping off a very short final season here. So we're going to talk about episode 5 and 6 of the season. We're going to talk about the season on the whole. And yeah, we're going to talk about the whole series as well, since this is likely going to be my final video ever talking about this family. So let's talk the Connors. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It, and welcome to what will probably be my final Connors review of all time. That is crazy. This channel has really been fueled by your enthusiasm for this family, and it started with Roseanne season 10, and I had such a powerful response to that first episode of the Roseanne revival. I said, well, maybe I'll just review these week after week, and then once Roseanne season 10 ended and we got the Connors, I did it all over again. And, still, these are some of the top videos of all time on my channel. I've had this channel for 10 or 12 years. And some of my top videos of all time are absolutely Connors and Roseanne reviews. First of all, let me thank you guys for always coming back to check these videos out. It means the world to me. And I've really loved discussing this family and these episodes with you guys week after week after week. It means a lot to me. So let's just start there. But in any event, you can go back and check out any of my old reviews at any time. I have them in playlists by season. So, if you're going through the syndicated episodes or, on Netflix or whatever, and, you want to check back in with the videos. But yeah, I mean, this will likely be the last time that I put up a video about the Connors. So very, very interesting. So we have 2 episodes here for the final: Exercise Bands, Money Plans on Faraway Lands, and then episode 6, The Truck Stops Here. I'm going to just kind of combine them. I will give them separate grades, but I think really, I want to focus more on this series as a whole, rather than just sort of pick apart these 2 episodes like, like I usually do, 20 minutes per episode. We're not going to do that. But this is, I think, going to be a long one. So, all right. So both of these directed by Jody Margolan Hahn. We talked about that before, that all 6 of these final episodes have been directed by Hahn. She is just an all-timer in the Roseanne and Connors universe. She's been a part of their world since the 90s. And then episode 5, written by Corey Kaplan. Again, we talked about this a few weeks ago because he did episode 2. He wrote that one. I don't know if that is like the son or the nephew or something of Dave Kaplan, who has been a part of the Roseanne universe since, almost the beginning. But he wrote episode 5, and then episode 6, and I think this is very appropriate, was written by Bruce Helford and Bruce Rasmussen. They have been a part of this universe for decades. And Bruce Helford specifically, I think, was one of the reasons that this show got made. I think it was him and Sarah Gilbert. Maybe Bruce Rasmussen was one of them too, but I know Bruce Helford was with Sarah Gilbert and kind of saying, hey, can we do something with this? The revivals are so hot. I mean, when you think about it, think about all the revivals that have come and gone, the reboots. Frasier only lasted 2 seasons. Will and Grace lasted 3 seasons. Fuller House was one of the first ones. That lasted a while, I think 6 years. But Night Court's still going. That's in season 3, I believe. But I mean, this has outlasted them all. 7 years of the Connors, a year with Roseanne. But anyway, so revivals were so hot about 10 years ago. And so Sarah Gilbert and Bruce Helford and maybe Bruce Rasmussen as well said, let's, see what we can do here. So I think it's very, very appropriate that the two Bruces wrote the finale. Boy, there's a lot to say about that finale. But let's talk about just all the sort of plot points here that they've introduced into the season, and they all got wrapped up. I thought maybe they would need a flash forward or something. And I was talking about this last week with some of you guys in the comments about the whole, drug trial thing, and if we're gonna go for the lottery ending of the original Roseanne, which obviously would have been a huge mistake. But it turns out that this didn't end up going to trial. We just had Dan's deposition in episode 5. He was getting ready for it. In episode 6, he had it. So that does get wrapped up. Jackie wanted to become a cop. that gets wrapped up. One of the last scenes of episode 6, Jackie shows up in her cop uniform, and the crowd cheers and everything. So in episode 5 and part of 6 as well, she was sort of preparing for that physical test to do. In episode 5, she wasn't so much preparing, but Louise was using these exercise bands, to kind of stay fit, get off some stress about the whole Roseanne deposition thing that she was feeling some type of way about. And so Jackie came in and tried to emulate her, and just couldn't do it. She was like, man, this is crazy. How am I going to pass this cop test? So that was that. Mark was not in the finale, but he was in episode 5. And him and Darlene were able to patch things up. So I guess we'll talk about that for a second, because that's the only storyline really that doesn't involve the finale at all, I guess. So he was at Grandpa Dan's house, and Dan and Jackie were there, and they were all kind of talking. And Dan was very impressed with Mark's ability to, get into the computers and hack them, and whatever he's doing. And he was very impressed with that. And Mark decided, sort of off screen, that he is not going to go to college. Jackie sort of set him up, even though she wasn't on the force yet. She still has some connections, and she set him up with this job far, far away. I forget, was it in DC? I actually forget what they said, but far from Chicago and from Illinois and from Lanford and all of that. So he decides that this would be a great opportunity. He'll start getting a decent salary after he's there for a little while and whatever, and move up in the ranks. And part of that is that he's not going to go to college anymore. So Darlene was very, very unhappy about that, and beside herself about it. Dan comes over to the house and tries to convince Darlene to, come to this dinner anyway and see Mark off. Please, please, please don't do to Mark what I did to Becky. Boy, did that bring me back. I love, and we'll talk more about this, I guess, when we talk about the series on the whole, but I really love that they've been not only keeping the memory of Roseanne as a character alive, and certainly this season, with the suing of the drug company and everything, but just throughout, just pitching these little Easter eggs to us fans from the beginning. We've been watching this show. We watched it originally, and then we watched it in reruns, over and over again. Some of these original episodes I've seen probably 10, 12, 15 times. And so he brought up the whole thing with Becky when Becky left, and he refused to talk to her, and that was tearing up thinking about it now. Those were some heart-wrenching episodes, when Becky would call and Dan didn't want to talk to her. And so he said, look, I urge you, please don't do this. Mark may never speak to you again, blah, blah, blah. And obviously, things worked out over the years. And look, Becky was welcomed back into the family with open arms after a little while, and Roseanne and Dan went over to their her and Mark's trailer park and whatever. But so I loved that they were sort of bringing that back. And Darlene didn't end up going to the dinner, but she showed up at the house as Mark was getting ready for his Uber. And so he was sitting out there, and she approached him, and they had a little talk. And another heart-wrenching moment, talking about how the one thing she wanted to do for him was make sure he had a college education, make sure he had the means, that she didn't. And they grew up poor, and he grew up without a dad, evoking the memory of Johnny Galecki's David and all of that. And so that was a great moment too, insisting, that he would call her once a week or whatever and check in. And yeah, I mean, she here's what's funny though about this. Like back in the original Roseanne days, going to college was like the choice. There wasn't much of a choice of like, I mean, you either go to college or you don't, but like trade schools weren't really as popular. Yeah, they were a thing. You could go to beauty school, you could go to, the one local to us was Penn Tech. You could get a couple year degree or 18-month degree or whatever in like automotive or whatever. But like now there's so many options for young people, and college is far and away not the only path because it's gotten so ridiculously expensive that a lot of people, with the college loans, are paying them back for decades. We could go on and on about that. But back in the original days of Roseanne in the 90s, going to college was like the thing. Like everybody did it. And now there are just so many different avenues. There's no reason really for Mark to go to college if he's already going to have this computer job, and he's going to be doing well there. There really isn't a reason. I'm surprised that Arlene didn't quite understand that. But at the same time, you have a vision for your child, and when that sort of goes askew, that's something that sometimes can't compute, in your brain. So I think Darlene was having a tough time with that. And I get it. She wanted better for him, and she worked her ass off to give him a college education. And she got a job at the school, and she did X, Y, and Z, all to make sure that he had something that she didn't have. But look, at the end of the day, he does. He's going right to this high profile job that he may have great success with. So that wrapped up the hacking story. He doesn't have to be arrested. Jackie doesn't have to turn him in or turn a blind eye or whatever. She helped him, along with that. So that was great. All right. And I think that's really the only storyline that didn't get concluded in episode 6. And I think that's only because Ames McNamara was not part of it. But in episode 6, we saw everybody. I mean, we saw Louise, Neville, Ben finally returned. He wasn't in episode. He hasn't been in the last few episodes. So I guess we'll talk about all of this real quick, because I do want to focus on the series as a whole. But essentially, we're leading up to the deposition. That was a big part of episode 5. Louise is feeling a bit left out, hearing about all of these, people saying, Roseanne, the love of your life, irreplaceable, blah, 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 blah. So she tries to talk to Jackie about it, which goes predictably poorly. Jackie's going off again about the whole Lamford life coach thing, but not really helping her at all. And look, I totally see where Louise is coming from, but I also see where Dan's coming from. He was married. Jackie said they were married for like 40 years, but they were married for, I would say, close to 50, right? Well, I guess if she died 7 years ago, all right, maybe like 45 or something, because they didn't have kids right away, did they? She wasn't pregnant with Becky when they got married, was she? Now I'm misremembering all of that. But in any event, they were married for at least 40 years. And so, yeah, it makes sense that she is really the love of his life. And, my parents are still married and still alive and all of that. So I don't know. I'm sure I would feel a certain way if, one of them passed away, and then a few years later, the other one remarried somebody that they knew in high school. I'm sure I would feel something about that. But I can't blame Louise for how she was feeling about this, and I can't blame Dan for going on and on about, especially, I mean, this season has been so steeped in the character of Roseanne because of the lawsuit that I don't know. I feel like you have to kind of keep talking and talking and talking about her if that storyline was going to resolve. Dan was having trouble remembering the timeline of events, so Jackie and Darlene, and I think maybe Becky too, wrote this, drew this big poster board, and Jackie kept trying to do mnemonic devices. That was funny. But it all kind of came to a head in episode 6. Dan had the deposition. Louise wasn't going to bother him before that because he was nervous enough about it, but she had it, not had it out, but discussed it with him after the fact, saying like, it's been tough hearing love of my life and, all of this stuff. It, leaves me a bit cold. Dan said, well, look, Roseanne was obviously a huge part of my life, and she was the love of that part of my life, but now, we're in a new part, and he joked that you get to watch me die, which Roseanne would have killed for. That was a funny line, but there were a lot of those, like sort of Connor barbs at the end of serious discussions. Ben and Darlene had one as well. But so that kind of resolved with that. And what else? So I guess since I mentioned Ben, let's talk about that storyline. So yeah, Ben's been absent for a while. Seth Green was not in episode 5, but he showed up again in episode 6. Becky and Harris went to the Lobo to sort of spy on her. Said, oh yeah, there she is, talking with Chad is the character's name. And so, he went a little bit overboard with what he thought their relationship was, and he suggests going out of the Lobo to eat, and maybe make it a date. And he used the word date, and Darlene was like, wait a second, I'm not really feeling that. And so they have it out a little bit, and Chad ends up leaving. She ends up following him out, which Becky and Harris watch. And Becky's like, I got to go talk to Ben. He has to know what's going on. So she meets Ben at the house and tells him, look, there's this guy, Chad, and Darlene's been seeing him every night. They've been having drinks together, eating together, talking because you're not around, this and that. So Darlene comes home without Chad and ends up talking to Ben about everything. And look, we didn't have a lot of time for every single storyline to get a whole, the time that it needed, let's say. So they resolved it pretty quickly, and had a cute little punch at the end with the joke. And she admitted, like, we never slept together. Now, she didn't say they didn't kiss, which I thought was interesting, but she did say we didn't sleep together. And Ben's like, well, if I die, would you call this guy tomorrow? And she jokes, why would I have to call him if he's laying in bed next to me? Great line. And really, sort of accentuates the Connor humor, and why Ben fits so well into this family, because he laughed at that joke. So that gets resolved that way. Then we have Becky and Tyler. I mean, they keep introducing new plots with like two episodes left. But now, so we already dealt with, like, he's a bit smothering. Now we're dealing with their money, and they Darlene, what did Darlene say? It was like their coworkers, splitting a business lunch or whatever. We learned that they're like Venmoing each other $3 here, $5 there, or whatever. If one of them does something for the other, the other. Personally, I think that's insane. I mean, look, everybody views money differently, but I mean, I buy food for my coworkers sometimes, and sometimes they get lunch, and it's like, I don't know, the nickel and diming of things. Is crazy, especially when you're in a relationship like that and they're living together and everything. So they both decide, okay, let's have, maybe a joint account, and we don't have to deal with this. What do you want? And Becky wants this big truck, and he wants a house, and all of this. So I don't know. It was, I don't know why they introduced that into the final episodes here. I guess to have something for Becky and Tyler to do. But I don't know. It seemed a bit odd. And so that kind of resolved, I guess, itself. But what else? So I guess let's go to here, the final portions of the finale. Because we already had Dan at the deposition, and he, got a bit angry at the guy, and obviously the lawyer on the drug company's part was very well versed in this kind of case, and so he was, kind of poking holes in Dan's story, and at the same time, sort of, I don't know, alluding to the fact that he didn't care enough, or that he was the reason that Roseanne died, or whatever. And obviously, we kind of went over that a couple of episodes ago between Dan and Becky, but that did not sit well, of course, with Dan. So, but he gets a call as he's actually having the conversation with Louise about how she's feeling about everything. He gets a call saying that they are getting a check. It is on the way. They're going to settle. So, to us, the audience, you're like, okay, well, now we don't have to do a flash forward. If they're going to settle, they're going to settle. I still think everything happened way too quickly, but in any event, so we have this great, closing. Well, there's two closing scenes, really. But the second to last one is at Roseanne's grave, and the whole family is there. I guess I should mention quickly that that guy that Harris had a thing for, and was that in the last episode 4, that she hired at the lunchbox, and he was doing a terrible job, but he was hot, so she still wanted to be with him. So it appeared, with no real explanation, that he and Harris are together. They do mention quickly that, she maybe sexually harassed him or whatever, and she sort of brushed that off. Well, we're dating now, so, it is what it is. But that was like at the beginning of episode 5. He was in both episodes. Okay, that's fine. But so he was there for all of this, and he went to the the grave site and everything, and we see Neville there, and really everybody in the cast from the last couple of seasons. So DJ didn't return. We'll say that. Nobody else returned from the old days, but other than Mark, who, like I said, exited in episode 5, everybody that's been a part of this main cast and even the recurring cast was present for this unveiling of the check at the gravesite, including Tyler, including Harris's new boyfriend that we just met last week, and including Neville and obviously Louise. So they are all, sort of gathered around. That's where Jackie comes in her cop uniform. We learn, okay, she, nailed the test. Everyone cheers, and that's great. And then we learn that the check is only $700. It basically says, hey, based on your deposition, we think we can, really knock this one out of the park. You'll get nothing. So please take the $700 check for transportation costs and whatnot, miscellaneous. And look, I got to admit, I'm glad that they went that route. Even a few $1,000s, I think, would have been not on brand for this family. And at first Dan seems like he's crying or whatever because he said, well, now we know what a Connor life is worth. But then I think he ended up sort of laughing about the absurdity of it all. And all of that. But look, it's an emotional time, obviously. It really does sort of put a pin on his wife's life, at that rate. So at that point, everyone sort of one by one from the core of the family, not, Tyler or whatever, but everyone goes up and says something to, the Roseanne's character, at her grave. Darlene talks about, her accomplishments, and Becky's like, hey, I've been sober a while and I just got this great job. And, Jackie says, hey, sis, I'm a cop again and whatever. Even Harris, comes over and says, I have your old restaurant and the food's good now. And then even Ben, walked over and just said hi, which was cute. But then, of course, we ended with Dan and, the things he had to say. And I'm going to choke up thinking about it, so we won't go too much into detail with that. But, basically, hey, we did it. We raised great kids and whatever. So, look, the show has always gotten me emotional. I've cried a couple of times in these videos. If you've watched my my review videos for the Connors over the years, I've cried a couple of different times. So I'm not embarrassed about that. But so then after that scene, we end in the living room. I mean, where else could you have ended, right? And then I understood why they brought Harris's new boyfriend into the picture. It's because every single person there was paired off. It was like this sort of closure of like, look, everybody found somebody, at the end. Now, a couple of them, well, most of them, I guess, are married, right? All of them except for Harris. Oh, and Becky and Tyler aren't married. But yeah, you had Neville and Jackie, Dan and Louise, Ben and Darlene had patched things up, thank God. Some of you in the comments were saying maybe they would get divorced by the end of the season. Boy, did I hope that didn't happen. I'm glad they did it this way. And then you have Becky and Tyler, and then Harris and the new kid. I forget what his name is. But as I was thinking, like, why is this kid even here? I realized, like, just looking at the picture, which is the thumbnail of this video here, is that, for the symmetry of it all, everybody was paired off. Everybody was, sort of happy in that way. And then they really did it to me and started showing the clips from the old show, which is just, it always gets me when they do. I mean, not necessarily like that one time they showed like the old George Clooney clip or whatever, from the bowling alley, but just showing these kids growing up, all the time. And they even put a clip of little DJ in there. I thought that was great. Now, of course, they don't have the rights to use Roseanne's likeness, so there were no clips of Roseanne, but certainly there's enough clips of Dan and the kids over the years with emotional moments, and funny moments to, satisfy our appetites. And so they did a cute little montage. Everybody leaves sort of one by one, and Dan's left there by himself, looks right at the camera, and says goodnight. And I lost it. Yeah, I mean, because it really is, I think a lot of us feel this way, that have grown up with these characters and everything. I mean, for me, I'm Darlene's age. I'm Sarah Gilbert's age. So this for me, has been since 1988. I watched the very first episode probably the night it came on, because it was so hyped up. And I think it was the number one show of that season, or maybe number two on its opening season. I mean, very few shows have that. And so, watching these characters grow up. And then for 20 years, we didn't see them. We saw their actors, doing different things or whatever. But then to have this second life for this family and these characters that you really do feel like are your own. Like Dan Connor. I have a great dad. And like I said earlier, he's still with us and everything. But Dan Connor was for me like the TV dad. So for him, to sort of just look right in camera, break that fourth wall, and just say goodnight. Jesus. So that broke me, all right. And then we came back with one final tag of Darlene and Becky when Becky is leaving to go be with her husband, and talking about how much they love each other, and then ending with that joke where they go into Wind Beneath My Wings. Darlene says, did you ever know you were my hero? And then that's the end of the show. So yeah, grade wise, look, like I said, we'll talk a little bit more. I know this video is already so long, but we'll talk about the series as a whole in a second. But grade wise, look, episode 5 was another one that I think is good, not great. It's sort of in that B range for me, but I will say I'll give it a B plus, because I really loved the scene with Darlene and Mark. I loved how that storyline resolved. I loved how they spoke to each other in those last few moments that we got to see, and I thought it was funny, Jackie doing her mnemonic devices for the deposition. I thought that was good. So yeah, I liked that episode more than most this season. But that finale, first of all, it's so much better than the original Roseanne finale. I didn't actually watch the Roseanne finale for a long, long time, probably 15 years, because season 9 was so terrible. In fact, I may not have watched the finale until I did my season by season reviews of the original Roseanne. So maybe it was 20 plus years since I watched it, or until I watched it. But season 9 was just so awful with the lottery and all of that. And then I had heard through the grapevine that like it was all half a dream anyway, and it was like part of Roseanne's book or what. And I was like, I don't want to watch this. This sounds so stupid. And sure enough, it wasn't great. This finale, I think, really, I mean, it didn't recover the horribleness of the original Roseanne finale, but it definitely left this family on a much better note, I think, than that did. And partially because that last season was just so god awful. And here we had the chance to explore these characters a little bit more and a little bit more realistically than Roseanne season 9 did. I've been saying it for weeks. We should have gotten 8 to 10 episodes, not 6. I think this season was very rushed as a result, and whatever. But look, I will leave. I think this stands as one of the finer moments of the entire series. So I will leave the finale, which is called, I don't even know if I said the names. I guess I did at the beginning. The Truck Stops Here. I'm going to give that an A. I think by far it's the best this season. But I think it's the best episode we've had in a couple of years. I think it is an absolute great finale. I think it would have not been right if they won, tens of thousands of dollars, in the deal from this lawsuit. I think $700 is so appropriate, and so in line with this family and their history and everything. But yeah, I thought it was a really, really great finale. I'm curious to see what you guys think, because I feel like from the comments, most of you have been on the same page with me in terms of like, this hasn't been a great season, and so hopefully the finale worked for you as well. So please let me know. In terms of a grade for the whole season, I think probably a B is where I'm going to leave it. Most of these episodes were Bs or B minuses. I think maybe there was one earlier B plus in episode 1, but yeah, I think for the most part, this has been a very lackluster season. But I think part of that is them having to sort of push everything in to 6 episodes. So let's talk quickly about the Connors on the whole. I know we're reaching a half hour here in the video, and I appreciate you guys sticking with me. Like I said, many of my top videos on the channel are Roseanne and Connors related, so I can't thank you guys enough. for all the support over the years with that. So with that, look, let's talk a little bit about the Connors on the whole. I think this has been a very rocky show. I think they finally figured out the formula in like season 3 or 4. But it's been interesting. And I think Roseanne season 10 had a little bit of this problem as well. But, they had to do what they used to do in 25 minutes per episode in like 21, 22 minutes. The network television landscape has changed dramatically in 35 years. And so episodes that used to be 24 and a half minutes, 25 minutes are now 21, maybe 22. But for the most part, they had to excise several minutes. And I really felt that it took them a few years to kind of work that formula out to give us, 3 separate storylines sometimes and give each one their due. I remember this being a complaint of mine, maybe in season 10 of Roseanne, but certainly in the Connor season 1, is that sometimes a scene would be like 35 seconds because they have to get information in, but they don't have time to really expand on it or do extra jokes or whatever. So it's like they would be these like whiplash kind of scenes. And I think it took a few seasons for them to figure that out. And I also think it took a few seasons for them to figure out who belongs in the series and who doesn't. Because for a while you had DJ and Mary, and his wife even. What was her name? I forget. The actress went on to be in this great show, The Unicorn, that was pretty short-lived on CBS. Maya, I don't remember her name. I don't want to get it wrong. But in any event, she left the Connors because, hey, you're not doing anything with my character. I'm going to go over here and do this Unicorn show, which was great. But I think it took them a few seasons to figure out that, like, look, as much as we like Michael Fishman, he's always part of the Connor family. We don't need him in these episodes, and I was beating that drum for a long time. Like, if you're not going to do anything with DJ, if you're not going to give him storylines, why is he here? And then after he left, Mary was still on the show, and I think that was partially because they felt like, oh, well, we need to be a little bit diverse, and everyone else on the show is very white, so let's keep Mary on. But then they weren't giving her anything to do either. So I think it took them a few years to kind of really crack that formula. But I will say, like the original Roseanne, this show certainly knew how to blend comedy with emotional moments, emotional drama, family drama, all of that kind of stuff. A couple of the standout episodes to me are, the Slappy Thanksgiving, where Aunt Jackie actually slaps Darlene. That was intense. And then the one that Lacey Goranson wrote, Triggered, which was about the school shooting. Those are 2 episodes that really stick out in my mind. I believe there might be the only 2 I gave A+s to throughout the run of this series. I'm not sure. But, it was great to see this family again and to really explore, like people that we grew up with, their life now. And we got a little bit of that as kids. When I was a kid, they had the new Leave It to Beaver or Still to Beaver, whatever it was called, where you saw the characters from Leave It to Beaver, except Hugh Beaumont, who had passed, grown up. And, there were a small handful of shows like that. And then it sort of died down. But to have really 8 more years with this family, when you include the season 10 of Roseanne, has been incredible. It's been just a great run. And I think, look, the original Roseanne certainly had hiccups with the lottery season and all of that. And really, the last 2 seasons were on the decline for sure. But this, I felt like the opposite. I felt it started out a bit rocky. And then by season like 3 or 4, the Connors really found its footing. So these last few seasons have been pretty great. This season, I just think they were given a short shrift with these 6 episodes, meanwhile giving that terrible Tim Allen show a full season. It's a real head scratcher. But I am glad that we got, another few weeks with this family. I'll wrap it there. I think this video is probably long enough. But again, I'm going to thank you all for sticking with me through all of this. You can check out the playlist. And I guess I should grade this series on the whole, right? I would give the original Roseanne probably like, I mean, it's like an A up until probably, season 8 maybe. And then that season is not as good. And then season 9 is like horrible. But overall, you know, Roseanne is still one of the greatest shows of all time. And if you're watching this video, I'm sure you agree with that. So for me, I don't know. This one certainly doesn't measure up to that. And it did take a little while to find its footing, and you know, people being absent from episodes. So many people were not in even half the episode. I mean, Ames McNamara, was he even in half of the episodes of The Conners? I don't know. Um, I think a B plus, if I'm being generous, is probably the right grade for this series on the whole. I'll leave it with a B. I think because it did have a lot of growing pains in those first couple seasons, but goodness, it's been great catching up with this family all over again. And you know, I want to thank them for all the laughs over the years and all the emotional, hard hitting moments that made me cry. And yeah, I mean, what a legacy of a show. I thank you guys for sticking with me through this, and please subscribe. If you've been watching my videos and haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? But look, I do a lot of other things on this channel other than the Conners content, and I know some of you have branched out into my other videos and reached out to me about that. But please consider subscribing and check out my other videos. I do movie and TV reviews, and just about every day I do post something. So there's always a lot going on here. And I don't know, you know, on to maybe find the new show. I was doing Frasier reviews as well for the revival, but obviously that is not getting a season 3, at least right now. So, all right, that'll do it. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.